day in which we celebrate the teaching of the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the first real teaching that the Buddha gave, delivered in the deer park in Sarnath to the 5 ascetics. The story is, I think, probably familiar to most of you already. The story of the Buddha finally realizing that the way of asceticism that he'd been following was not going to be productive, no matter how much skillful and diligent effort he expended. He was reminded of Ajahn Jayasara's simile of fishing in a pond with no fish. No matter how hard-working and how sincere his efforts would be, it's not going to be successful. But to realize this, he had the memory of the meditation experience that he'd had as a child, the ploughing ceremony at the palace. Accepted the rice sweet from Sujata, and sat under the Bodhi tree, realized enlightenment. And after experiencing the bliss of enlightenment for some time, he was disinclined to teach because it seemed that the Dhamma was just so profound, so difficult to understand, particularly the nature of Nibbana and the Paticcasamuppada. These are the things that he particularly mentioned as being so profound that he doubted whether anyone could really grasp and penetrate the meaning of those teachings, and that if he was to teach those teachings to beings that were too immature to be able to penetrate their meaning, then they might fall away from the good qualities that they had developed, rather than develop further deeper good qualities. And then, of course, Brahma Sahampati, senior, the Brahma gods, comes down and famous words that gives the reasoning that there are beings with few or little dust in their eyes, meaning their defilements are quite weak and can, given the right teachings and right instructions, be abandoned. And the Buddha accepts this reasoning and then uses his psychic powers to determine who would be the best people to teach. He's going to start teaching. Well, where should he start? He thinks of his former samadhi teachers first, who with such strong powers of concentration must have been so close and yet so far from liberation, and finds that they've already passed away. Then he thinks of the Panchavakki, the 5 of his former disciples who've given up on him out of disgust at his abandonment of ascetic practices. Now they're in the deer park, so he walks to the deer park, 200-300 kilometers, in order to teach his former disciples. And in fact has his first unsuccessful teaching engagement on the way, when someone asks him, who he is, why are you so radiant? And he says, I'm a fully enlightened Buddha, and the man says, maybe so, something like this, not convinced, not inspired, and perhaps we can deduce from that the Buddha realized that that's not the best way to teach, just to announce one's Buddhahood and expect people to respond to it. When he arrives at Saranath, I always find it very moving and memorable kind of scene with the 5 ascetics, depressed, angry, disappointed, someone they've been following for years, and someone who'd been prophesied to be either a great emperor, wheel-turning monarch, or else fully enlightened Buddha. They were the sons, apart from Kodanyu, who was the youngest of the astrologers, they were the sons of the astrologers who'd made these prophecies and been groomed to be the Buddha's disciples since they were children. And they felt utterly betrayed, and they didn't want to go out and receive his bowl and wash his feet and do all the upatak duties that they'd formerly done. The Buddha, and they spoke to the Buddha, and they spoke to him quite informally. They didn't show any great respect as they'd done before. But the Buddha, through his presence and through his words, persuaded them to listen. And he began this famous discourse, which really is the framework, or we could say the footprint within which all the other suttas fit. And it starts off quite obviously by putting their fears and their prejudices to rest, by saying that the way that he's discovered is not the way of sensual indulgence as they think. It's not the way of karma sukhalikanu yoga. But having reassured them about that, then he says, nor is it the way of misguided asceticism. This is the middle way. So the teaching of the middle way appeared in the world on that full moon of July, or the Asalahat full moon, 2,500 so years ago. And the teaching that the Buddha gave, his explanation of the middle way, was a teaching of the Four Noble Truths, particularly the Eightfold Path, as a way of realizing Nirodha. And this is a framework for our practice these days, and it's the framework which I think you can see very clearly in the way that Ajahn Chah taught. And his way of teaching was one of constantly encouraging us to look at our minds and try to comprehend the nature of dukkha. And what is dukkha? I think it's very important to realize we don't really know what dukkha is. The only people who really know what dukkha is are the arahants, or the Arya Pugalas. But we could say really who the only one who knows what dukkha really means in all its depth is the arahant, because clearly penetrating, understanding nature of dukkha entails the abandonment of samudaya, the realization of nirodha, and the perfection or fulfillment of the Eightfold Path. These four things are inseparable. So, as you've heard many stories of Ajahn Chah's teaching methods of Toraman and so on, and the principle underlying them is to see experientially the relationship between dukkha and tanha, where you're put in the situation where you feel uncomfortable or things are difficult, and your Ajahn Jayasaro directness was forcing you to really see that the suffering is coming from your wrong thinking, from your attachment, rather than from the situation or from the particular individuals involved. It's the story that Ajahn Sumedho tells many times of Ajahn Chah asking him, is Wapapong suffering? And his cases where he frustrates you on purpose to enable you to see why is that frustrating? Why is that so painful? What is this all about? And that's the questing mind, the one that really wants to see what is this all about? What's going on here? And not trying to create a wall around yourself so that you don't suffer, but looking to comprehend the nature of suffering in all of its forms and guises as it appears in your practice, both while you're sitting cross-legged in the formal meditation practice, while you're on your Jongkon path, or while you're doing your duties and serving the Sangha, or generally throughout your daily life. This is the effort and that we put forward, and the Buddha himself summarized the practice on many occasions, saying what we're trying to do as bhikkhus is to understand, this is suffering, and this is samudaya, this is nirodha, this is magga. Really to go into this. What is suffering? What is samudaya? What is nirodha? What is magga? And so our putting forth of effort into formal practice is the development of the path in order to really comprehend dukkha and to abandon its cause. And this is the right view that we have. I found something I jotted down years ago that Ajahn Chah said. I was just going through some old papers the other day, and Ajahn Chah said that samadhi means being one-pointed in samadhi, being fully concentrated or firmly established in samadhi. So that doesn't just mean being firmly established in a view, in your daily life. You don't shake in your view in the law of karma or the Buddha's enlightenment, but it means that in the samadhi practice, that concentration, that one-pointedness, is one imbued with right view, right understanding. You could say it's the culmination of the harmonious development of samatha and vipassana, with fully established, firmly rooted in right view. So Ajahn Chah's way is sila and samadhi as the firm foundations on the path. These are the things he stressed over and over again. Sila, patimokkha, discipline, all the rules in the patimokkha, and all the rules outside the patimokkha, and seeing the faults, seeing the danger, and seeing the drawbacks in the slightest fault and the slightest infringement of the rules, and the rationale behind that is that we are karma producing, or kamma producing creatures, and by every waking moment we're creating kamma, So every time you act in a wholesome way, you are producing wholesome karmic formations. You are strengthening the wholesome in your mind. Every time you follow the unwholesome way and delight in it, then you strengthen that unwholesome Dhamma in your mind. This is the karmic law. So every time you train your mind and you incline the mind in a wholesome direction, you're making a path in the mind which makes it easier the next time and the next time. It's about creating. You talk about like ruts in the road, if you like, but perhaps it's not such a good simile for wholesome Dhammas, because we tend to associate ruts with negative things, but it's creating new paths, new pathways for the mind. And every time you follow along that path, then you make that path a little bit more easy to walk along. Just as, let's say, we make paths in the forest, and the more we use those paths, the more we tread down the weeds, and the more that path becomes easy and convenient for use. And in our daily life it's the same. So moment by moment we're confronted with this choice of following magga, following the path, or following defilement. And Luang Por used to say that the practice is to be mindful, to know, and to be aware constantly of whether the mind is in a wholesome or an unwholesome state. And the Vinaya rules, both those in the Patimokkha, those outside of the Patimokkha, are designed to be tools to assist you in being aware of the state of your mind, whether it's a wholesome or an unwholesome state, because there's not a single rule in all the thousands of rules that prevents you from doing something wholesome. They prevent you performing actions which are necessarily accompanied by an unwholesome state. So it's helping you to wake up, helping you to be to have the Buddha knowing within your mind, samadhi, it's a right understanding, right view, developing that on the intellectual level and on the experiential level together. And developing this understanding of what dukkha is carried on, and the catalyst, or that which really carries it onwards, is the formal practice, the kind of mindfulness and awareness you can develop in everyday life is still quite coarse compared with that which can be developed in the formal meditation practice. And this is why the formal meditation must always be the heart of our life. Must always be the core. And when all's said and done, our contentment in the holy life is related to this aspect of our lives more than anything else. No matter what the other conditions might be, if your formal practice is well, and you still are enthusiastic for it, and you still look forward to practice, and you can stay with it, and you want to do it, you want to find time for it, then you're never going to be far off the middle path. If you're not really applying yourself to it as resistance, and you're following that resistance to formal practice, or you're getting depressed or discouraged. These are danger signals, because when you lose that enthusiasm for formal practice, you lose your anchor, you lose your core, you lose your center. And so, difficult as it may be sometimes, must keep reflecting and keep looking at things in a wise way that maintains a positive feeling for your formal practice, one which is not tied too closely to the results of formal practice, but formal practice as an expression of your devotion to Triple Gem, as a sense of your duty as a samana. So at different times you may find reflecting on it in different ways successful. At certain times, the view of formal meditation practice as Buddha puja, as puja of the Buddha, can be very uplifting. At other times it might not work, and reflecting on the fact that you're a samana. This is the proper and appropriate work of the samana. So using the ideal of the samana as that which brings up faith and energy. Thinking of the results of meditation practice, thinking of the great teachers that we look up to and revere, the fact that they've reached that stage because of their diligence in putting forth effort in formal practice. Finding ways of maintaining this enthusiasm and devotion to training your mind on that level. This is one of the skills. It's not just the skill of applying a technique, but it's a skill of maintaining the will and the desire to apply that technique. If you know a technique and you've mastered it, but you still not really applying it in a regular, systematic way, then it won't produce the results, and then start to doubt in the results. And with doubt in the results, the less effort you put in. The less effort you put in, the less results you get, and it goes round and round. So the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta is saying, is one in which the Buddha relates his insights. His insight was, this is dukkha, this understanding of dukkha. And then the second step was, dukkha is something to be comprehended. It's not to be something to be hated or feared or repressed. It's not something to run away from, but suffering is something to be comprehended. And he realized, he knew, I have comprehended suffering. And he understood what the cause of suffering was. The relationship between tanha, ignorant craving, and dukkha. And he realized it's this which has to be abandoned. He realized he had abandoned it. He understood what the freedom from dukkha is, what nirodha is, and that it's this which must be realized, and he had realized it. Guys, this is the path. This is exactly what involves. Not the path of sensual indulgence, not the path of self-mortification, but a path of right view, right thought, right aspiration, right action, right speech, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. All these factors together are the path, and it's this which must be developed. And he knew that he had developed it. So this is the framework that the Buddha gave in the very first sermon, and it's one which he expounded upon and explained in many different ways over the following 45 years. But the teachings all lay within the footprints of the footprint of the Four Noble Truths, just as the footprints of all the animals in the jungle fit within the footprints of the elephant. It's the famous simile in the Majjhima Nikaya. So in Pansa we make a special effort in certain ways. It's not such a major departure from the way we live our lives outside the Pansa, and certainly it shouldn't be. If it is, then it's something to worry about. But it is a time to consciously put aside other interests, other projects, and really make this a time to devote to the formal practice and to the study and memorization of the Vinaya. So this is the Dhamma Vinaya that we're practicing. So there will be plenty of time for developing meditation practice. There will be maybe twice a week, 2 times, 3 times a week, formal Vinaya study practice. This again is something in which we can develop our bhavana. It's more of a vipassana practice, if you like, because the Vinaya meetings can bring up a whole range of mental states, ranging from keen interest, enthusiasm, through to complete boredom and despair and frustration and everything in between, and it changes. But again, yoniso manasikara, right reflection, is invaluable here, and really learning to reflect upon, look upon study of Vinaya in the most constructive way. Not if you are someone who finds it uninteresting or picky or I've heard all this before or whatever, then not to follow that, just to let that go and to realize this is teaching of the Buddha. And there was again a quote Ajahn Jayasaro again, that he's for him, he says pretty straightforward, all the different attitudes to Vinaya and how important Vinaya practice is and Vinaya study is. He said as far as he's concerned, the Buddha taught the Vinaya, and just out of respect for the Buddha, keeps the Vinaya, studies the Vinaya and keeps the Vinaya because the Buddha told him to. And that's it, not that any sense of himself being strict and sort of especially strict about the Vinaya, but he just takes it seriously because it's an important part of the Buddha's teaching for monastics. And so they're calling upon that kind of faith and confidence in the Buddha's wisdom enable us to bear with some aspects of the Vinaya which can seem pretty dreary or pretty hard to get through. To remember, this isn't just something composed by some philosopher, and this is a system, these are rules which were laid down by the Buddha himself. And then we keep coming back to the Four Noble Truths, and if you're suffering, why are you suffering? Now, we know the answer already, it's because of samudaya, it's because of tanha. So where's the tanha right now? Where's the craving? Is it kama tanha? Is it bhava tanha? Is it vibhava tanha? Is it tanha for forms? Is it tanha for sounds? Is it tanha for odors? Is it tanha for taste? Is it tanha for physical sensations? Is it tanha for ideas? And this is where we look, and this is how we practice, and we let go. So this is, I feel it's kind of special pansa, at least for me. Pansas are always special in one way or another. So maybe it's a first pansa here as a monk, or first this or first that, or everyone has, pansas tend to have some significance for whatever stage of your monastic career you're at. This will be my 9th pansa as the senior monk here, the 5th consecutive one, and as you know, it'll be the last one before Ajahn Jayasaro takes over. It's also I think it's the pansa where we have the largest bhikkhu sangha that's ever been here for pansa. I'm not sure, it's probably the largest sangha overall that we've ever had here. So quite. That's going to be up to all of us, and how much work we're willing to put into it. So looking on it as a time to work, to put forth effort, but also a time to enjoy, because what we find with Dhamma practice, as opposed to perhaps some kinds of activity, then the hard work is in itself enjoyable. Every step of the path can be fulfilling, even if you're not where you would like to be yet, or whether you hope to be one day. You can enjoy the difficulties, even enjoy them as challenges, rather than as my bad karma, or why do I always have to put up with this. And so there's a lot of us, or a lot of you, a lot of us with physical difficulties, and whether some people have problems with their knees, some people with their backs, some people internal problems, external problems, all kinds of things. And this is a challenge to be able to deal with this skillfully, and to incorporate it in the practice, rather than kind of resenting it as an obstacle to the practice. It's really amazing what you can accomplish through wise consideration. Changing the attitude to things changes so much of our experience. It's just like flicking something over. Sometimes it can be that easy, where you just suddenly you can look at it in a different way, and it's not such a heavy burden anymore. As regards the schedule during the pansa, there will be a schedule posted, and I talk about this a little bit more tomorrow. But to give you a rough idea, we did discuss this one evening, and I would like to more or less conform to that consensus that we would have morning meetings throughout the pansa, afternoon meetings which would be alternate more or less between Vinaya meetings and and sittings, group sittings, and not to have evening meetings, so that those could be periods for putting forth effort in solitude and in the posture which you find most conducive in meditation. However, I do feel that particularly as the last week or two have been very busy, and I feel it's quite useful to be able to create, a sense of we're actually going into a pansa rather than more or less doing things as we have been, and merely that we've been through a small ceremony. I was thinking today actually that for the first 2 weeks of the pansa, I'd like to have evening meetings throughout that 2 weeks, just so that we can establish a new kind of rhythm in the monastery, and a real sense of entering pansa, which I think was one of the successful aspects of the schedule last year, where we had morning and evening, afternoon and evening meetings for the whole 3 months. So I would like to have evening meetings until the next Uposatha, after which we will follow that schedule of having free time in the evenings for individual practice. I've also made a rough schedule of individual retreats. This is following a practice that we've had going for 2 or 3 years now, and this is practice for the bhikkhus, and giving bhikkhus, each of the bhikkhus, an opportunity to do a 2-week personal retreat, where you're not expected to come out for any meetings at all, and don't need to go bindabat, just to come out in the morning to the table and take your food and disappear again. I did mention when we were discussing this some time ago that it's not actually compulsory, and if you don't feel that it'd be particularly helpful to you to practice in that way, you don't want to do a 2-week retreat alone in your kuti, then that's fine as well. But I've made out a rough schedule, and it is open to, we can look at it if somebody really feels that they'd like to do their retreat at a certain time in the pansa, and they'd like to do it towards the end. I put them towards the beginning, or they'd like to do it at the beginning and put them towards the end. We can discuss that tomorrow. The schedule is in my office with Tan. You've still got that, yeah. So if anybody wants to have a look at it, and one thing would like to have going is, apart from a weekly silent day, to carry on that tradition, in which that would be an exception when we won't have an evening meeting, is to have a period of silence from after tea until after the meal the following morning, right through the pansa. So to have a real sense of silence during the evening and morning, and it shouldn't actually be that difficult to keep, as there won't be any group activities that require talking during that time. a core what point. I'm sure most of you have heard this before. As regards wearing two robes on Bindabat is concerned, then to repeat the standard here is that you may leave your Sangati in the sala if it looks as if rain is imminent. That means like there must be at least a kind of a 75% chance of rain. The sky's grey, there's a bit of a wind up, it looks really sticky, and it looks like it's going to rain at any moment. But if you look out in the sky and there's just one or two clouds scudding across high up in the sky, that's not sufficient cause to leave your Sangati. I know that it can be a little bit difficult, but it can sometimes on some days it seems like really dark, and then when you get out the monastery it's not so bad. But again, if you are leaving your Sangati behind because you feel it's going to rain, then you should take an umbrella with you. If you leave your Sangati and don't take an umbrella, then one wonders just how seriously you take the prospect of rain. I know that I don't think anybody really enjoys wearing two robes on Bindabat, but this is one of those parts of the training that we do out of respect for Ajahn and the tradition in which has nurtured us and has given us so much. As I say, I don't think anybody, if they were going to write their own Vinaya, would include this as one of the rules, but there you go. Just bear with it. If it is rainy, then it's fine to do Sangati behind.
Although, like you see, sometimes monks will leave their Sangati behind and take an umbrella and get to the gate. Leave the umbrella at the gate.
Yeah, that's all right, except, just basically to be really honest with yourself. Sometimes people, it just becomes a ritual to leave your Sangati and take your umbrella and leave it on the gate, because I've said, it's inconsistent to not to go without to just take your umbrella and leave it on the gate on the way out. So, if you're doing that, then that's not in the spirit of it. But if you genuinely feel it's going to rain and you get to the outside of the monastery and it's blown over and you really don't feel it, and you've got a long walk ahead of you and you don't want to carry your umbrella all that way, then obviously I can understand that. But basically watch your mind and don't follow defilements. That's the golden rule. Whether something can just kind of squeeze into the boundaries of what's allowable. If you really feel that you're following the defilements there, then is this what I want to encourage? Isn't this what I'm supposed to be trying to abandon? Tambora Bodhi, there's one or two of the women have commented about, is it yours? I imagine it must be you putting robes and bathing cloths out on the line by the side of the path there. Yeah, it's better not to put things there, because that's like a public path where women go by and they feel it's kind of improper and like it's like time. Yeah. Well, I have to have a look, because there's kind of a lot of sensibilities about washing in sort of Thailand, and because that's kind of a public path which women use a lot. It shouldn't be visible from the road, basically. Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up at this point? Who's our bell ringer now? Still some pajama?
It's been changed.
Who's doing it? Time, about 10 minutes. My Upataks, Moshe and Pranitano and Tanrochino and Bata Ajahn Jayasaro. Your night for your 10 minutes. Who wants to go on Rom Sang Bindabat? Next few days, like on Saturday. Nobody wants to go on Rome Sang Bindabat.